welcome to Conscious Talk, radio that makes a difference. Well, coming up this hour on Conscious Talk, have you ever thought that if you could get out of your own way, life would be so much easier? Well, we'll talk to Holly Riley, author of Allowing, about her journey through disease and near death that led her to believe miracles happen if you can let life love you. We'll find out how, coming up next on Conscious Talk. And I welcome your hosts for the day, Brenda Michaels and Rob Spears.
Thank you, Benny, and welcome, folks, to another hour of Conscious Talk, radio that makes a difference. Well, we're more than a radio show, folks. We are a movement in consciousness, and we are here to help change the world. That is one listener at a time. That's from the inside out, and that listener is you.
Well, we've been excited now. We're coming up on 11 years that, we've been starting your day in a brand new way. Not so brand new for many of you, but for those of you just tuning in for the first time or recent listeners, welcome, and thanks for coming along on this journey with us. This has been, it's been quite a ride. And we love bringing you people who, not only are great sources for all of the things that are shifting in our lives, but are also inspirational. And that would be this morning's guest, Holly Riley. She wrote this incredible book called Allowing. It's a portrait of forgiving and letting life love you, but driven by faith in humanity and a life-altering death experience. Holly dedicated her life to the study of empowering people, and we're going to allow her to empower you this morning. Holly, welcome to Conscious Talk. Hey, we don't want to lay too much on you now.
Way to go, Rob. Way to go. Yeah. Well, first of all, you too, I just want to thank you so much for what you do and what you bring. I celebrate every show, and I am just very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Holly. We really appreciate that. And I think I want to start off, Holly. This was such an amazing book, such an amazing story. It was a page-turner. There was no doubt about it. And this was sort of written as a memoir, and then you have an accompanying a handbook called Allowing with all the principles in it, etc. But you faced a major, major health challenge in your life. So I want to start off with that. Tell us about that health challenge that you faced.
Okay, Brenda. Well, the thing that happened to me mostly was that I had held on to a lot of resentments and a lot of not feeling good about myself, and not knowing I was doing it. I had stored a lot of it in my body, and I ended up with a horrific case of Crohn's disease, which is an affliction of the intestinal tract, and it's an autoimmune disorder, interestingly enough, where your body starts attacking itself, which is not only what happened to me physically, I was also doing it emotionally and spiritually. And I ended up at 84 pounds. I'm 135 pounds, 5'10", and I was being fed through a tube. And I had been in the hospital for a month when the doctor said to my husband, "You need to call the family. I don't think she's going to make it through the week." They had tried everything they could to have my body stop. I hadn't had a drop of food in 4 months, and I wasn't even allowed to have ice cubes. No stimulation. And, something very interesting happens when you stop eating. Some type of an awareness opens up that I had no familiarity with, and I began a journey of awakening that changed my life forever. And the evening, 2 days after my family came, and I have to tell you, when you look in your family's eyes for what might be the last time, you love them.
No matter what.
No matter what, even though I was abused and I had a horrific childhood, I held their faces with such love, and I knew there was something that mattered much more than non-forgiveness.
It's interesting from the point of view of spirituality here, Holly, because I guess you were surprised to find yourself in this predicament because you were you considered yourself pretty spiritually involved in your life, and yet, here you were.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, Rob. And the thing that amazed me is I had no idea, after all the work that I had done, that I was still hanging on to these thoughts and ideas of not being good enough, of not doing enough, of never amounting to what I felt I should. And the thing that happened, if I may tell you, as I moved away from my body, when I left my body during the near-death experience, I looked back and I saw that thoughts were alive and they were held inside my body. I looked back at the crumpled form on the hospital bed with such compassion because I had no idea. But I can tell you this, I knew exactly how I got sick. I could see that, Kristen Northrup has a great quote. She says, not forgiving someone is like taking poison and waiting for them to die.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
And then that's what, and you both know you've had your own experiences, but
right.
What I realized as I moved away was, oh my gosh, I could have let that go. And as I was held into what I call the arms of the sacred, because there are so many names for it, I never knew so much love and peace existed and was available to me. I had never known it until that happened. And I was held there for such a time in pure, no agenda, no need to do anything, but feel loved and adored and perfect and whole. And this is what I know. This is available for every single person. But we all get tied up in this idea of not being good enough or not looking good enough or not helping someone enough. And I tell you, as I was lying there, I knew I had a choice, and I was given the choice. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was so excited to come back to my body and heal it. And I did. I learned how to let go of what I'd been holding on to. And I can tell you, I ask every day for this sacred feeling to come and move through me and remind me. And that's what I go and speak to people about. It's here. You have to ask. Call it whatever you want, higher self, call it spirit, call it divine mother, call it anything, but you got to call it.
Right.
No.
And you're making a very good point, Holly, about the asking part of it. That spirit moves through us, that divineness of us moves through us, but there has to be an opening for that to move through. We have to be the saying, God helps those that help themselves. And we have to really call it forth. And I think that we forget that very often. I think that we forget to call forth what we want, what we truly want. And I often feel, and maybe you have learned this as you've been out speaking with people and teaching, that not only do we forget to ask, but we don't even often know what to ask and how to ask it.
It's so true. And here's what I'd love to tell you a little story because it's right aligned with what you're saying. You're so right. We don't even realize how powerful what we're thinking is or what we're feeling is. Do you realize every single thing we do every day is because we want to have a feeling? Whether it's brush our teeth, go to bed at a certain time, be with a certain person, we are hungry for a feeling, whether it's accomplishment, success. We want a feeling. But here's what's interesting. How often do we sit and actually allow the feeling to exist? Do you ever sit at the end of the day and say, wow, I accomplished exactly what I wanted to. I'm going to bask in the feeling that I wanted to have. No, we run right on to the next item on our list.
Right.
We never stop to have that joyful feeling. And here's what I want to tell you, that joyful feeling, that gratitude, that appreciation, that feeling is what heals a body. It heals a soul and a heart. And here's the story. After I got back from the hospital, I started researching near-death experiences because I wanted to see if other people were having the same experience as I did. And yes, so many of them saw the light. So many of them felt this tremendous love. so many people got to have a peek at what was important. And there was one story I have to share with you that brought me to my knees.
Well, maybe you might want to hold on to that one.
Hold that story,
We're
yes.
going to run off to a break, and we don't want to interrupt your story in the middle. Folks, we are talking with Holly Riley. She has a wonderful book called Allowing. It's a portrait of forgiving and letting life love you, and you can, too, be in this situation, and that's why we bring you folks like Holly. We'll be right back. You're listening to Conscious Talk.
You're listening to Conscious Talk, radio for the progressive thinker.
Ain't no place I'd rather be than with you. Yeah, loving you. Well.
And welcome back to Conscious Talk, radio that makes a difference. Hey, there is no place we'd rather be than with you, and we're loving you, and we feel the love coming back. That's, it's one of the wonderful things about being on radio is you can't see, but you can feel, and that is a very big theme, folks, and that follows up with who we're talking to this morning, because we're talking with Holly Riley. She's the author of an incredible book called Allowing. It's a portrait of forgiving and letting life love you. Also, the Allowing Handbook that goes with it. It's where the strategies for manifesting your dreams, and the work that you do to get there is found. I'm Rob Spears.
And I'm Brenda Michaels. And we're just speaking, Holly, in the first segment about your story, about your health challenges, the abuse you grew up with. And then I brought up something about how when you were talking about asking for the feeling and relishing in the feeling, and I brought up the point that not only do we not ask, we may not know what to ask, and we may not know how to ask. And then you started to tell us a story.
Well, I'm so glad to be able to share this because there's something that I think most of us are unaware of, and it's that we really ask, but it's on an unconscious level, and here's how we do it. We do it by what we're feeling. It's like a transmission to the universe to please bring us more of that. So how we treat ourselves, how we look at ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, the self-talk, is actually emitting, it's a beacon asking for the universe to please bring more of the same. In many ways, we ask without being aware. So the invitation is to become more aware of what you're sending out, because whether you're conscious of it or not, you're vibrating something out and people respond to it. Have you ever noticed how even when you walk in a room, you can feel when somebody's really grumpy. You can feel when they're really happy. You're either attracted in a direction or you're repelled. And that's why I want to tell you this story. Oh, my gosh. When I started looking into near-death experiences, I found one that really, it brought me to my knees. There was a woman on a freeway in L.A. There was a several-car pileup, and her car was on the bottom. And she wrote this story up, and when you read it, it will make you just tear up. She was on the bottom, and they had to leave her there for quite a long time. They had to get the jaws of life. It took over an hour and a half to get her out of the car. There was traffic lined up in 5 lanes so far. So far, past where the eyes could see. She left her body. She floated around, and she described that there was so much meanness coming from the cars. She could feel the words. They were like, oh, I'm going to be late for work. Oh, I can't make it to pick up my kid. Oh, what an idiot. Who wrecked now? Why can't these people drive? Mm-hmm. There were so many negative thoughts moving in her direction that she moved so far away from her body to get away from them because they were so painful. And she looked down the row of cars, and there was one single person in a car, and there was such a vibration coming from it that she automatically moved toward it. She got so close, all of a sudden, the light coming from the car bathed her, and she felt soothed. And do you know what that woman was doing in that car?
praying for her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
She was saying, please let her be safe. Please take care of her family. Please let everything be okay. And she was sending thoughts of comfort to this woman, to this wreck. And the woman stayed there. And listen, she got so close. She saw the woman's face. She even had the wherewithal somehow to remember the license number. She woke up in her body, was in the hospital for 6 months, almost every bone broken, rehabilitation. Do you know what she did when she got out of that hospital? She found that woman. She went to the DMV, told them the story, gave them the license number she thought she saw, and took a bouquet of flowers to that woman's house.
That's a beautiful story.
Your thoughts matter. Your intentions matter. You make a difference in the world like a stone being thrown in a still pond. Ripples come out from you. Ask. Ask for what you want. Ask today. Invite whatever you consider divine to be with you and watch what happens. Notice the bounce in your step. You matter and you are so powerful beyond anything you've been taught to believe.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wanted to bring up something, Holly, about the autoimmune disease that you had and how the body attacks itself. And when we're sitting with those thoughts and the resentments that you were feeling towards your father and mother, the treatment that was given to you, and, you know, as a child growing up in an environment like that, it's only natural for you to take on those thoughts and feelings after being abused like that. But what's interesting, I feel, about the body is that it doesn't know, I feel it doesn't know the difference. When we harbor those feelings, when we harbor those thoughts, when we harbor limited and negative beliefs, the body doesn't, and we're aiming it at something. We're always projecting it out, whether we're projecting it on to the perpetrators or whatever. I feel like the body doesn't know the difference. It just knows.
I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it just knows the environment it is in, and that environment is very poisonous and toxic. And so it makes sense that we have these autoimmune diseases, that it's turned in on itself.
It's so true, and there's so many people now suffering with autoimmune disorders. And one thing you said is so good, if I can tag on it. When we blame something outside of us for what we're feeling, when we continue to try to project it outward, here's an interesting thing. As we blame it, we also give all our power to that thing. As we blame what we're feeling or what we're thinking or experiencing on something outside of us, we have to wait for the thing outside of us to change so we can feel better. And what happens as a child or even an adult, often we want to project it outward. We want to blame that something outside of us is causing our disease. But you know what? When we do that, we're actually giving away our power. We actually don't have the wherewithal to heal. And it's a double-edged sword because we also turn on ourselves because we're not able to feel better, and then we begin blaming ourselves. Mm-hmm. Blame is one of the most self-sabotaging actions a human can participate in, whether they're blaming the government, blaming the doctor for not healing them right, blaming the parents, or blaming themselves. It is a waste of attention, and it is actually sabotaging all opportunities to heal. So even in the handbook, I have this little exercise that helps people let go of blame so they can take that creative energy and start putting it toward what they want to experience instead of losing it in trying to find out whose fault it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to nail this one on the head.
Go for it.
Because one of the things that, you know, that we've discovered over the years, and it so pertains to what you were just talking about, is that it really doesn't matter how, you know, exactly what you said. When you blame something, you're sitting in the energy of blame. You know, you're sitting in in a negative energy. It doesn't matter what that energy is. If it is a negative one, then you're going to feel the effects. Now, I say this because over the years we learned, as we reinvented the cancer that we went through multiple times, that we would not
Wow.
heal until we made the spiritual, emotional shifts, not just the physical ones. And Holly, isn't it your experience when you talk to people, and it may have been your first one, I don't know, but we always go for the physical cure and we forget about the emotional, spiritual one, and then guess what? There we are, still sitting in the energy, and we're going to recreate.
Oh, Rob, I'm so glad you said that. For anyone who's listening, for anyone who's suffering from any kind of illness, from any kind of physical pain, even something as small as a backache, I always invite whoever I work with to take a look and see, what are you resisting? What is it in your life? What is it? Who is it? What are you focusing on and resisting? Because often what we do, Rob, is we hold that feeling of resistance inside, and then it festers, and then it develops. The people that I have worked with that have cancer or that have Crohn's disease, every single time, we end up working through what they're resisting. We find a place inside of them where they have been trying not to feel something. Mm-hmm. They've been trying not to feel a sadness that they've carried forward, a trauma that they've carried forward. And it's very interesting. If you think about it like this, let me give you a visual. If you took your left hand and you thought of it as something you're resisting in life, it could be a pain, it could be physical, it could be emotional. It could be failure. It could be an idea. It could be a person. It's your left hand, and here you are, your right hand. Now, in order to resist it, you have to push against it. You have to somehow put a little bit of your creative energy in the direction of keeping it at bay. And do you know, every drop of your energy, attention, and thought is going to make it bigger. When you resist something, you glue yourself to it. In order to push against it with your right hand, what do you always have to touch? And you know what happens even with, I don't care if it's a 70-year-old or a 15-year-old that I work with, they always find they had no idea they were resisting so much. And when you resist something, Harry Palmer, author of the Avatar Tools, has an amazing quote. I love this quote. Whoever or whatever attention is placed on becomes more real. Whoever or whatever attention is placed on becomes more real. When I was so sick and in so much pain, I resisted my disease with all my might. I was embarrassed. I tried to ignore it. I got angry at it. I even talked mean to my body. I thought it was the worst thing in the world. And do you know, with every drop of my resistance, it became larger. It wasn't until I allowed it.
Absolutely. And hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Conscious Talk, radio to live by.
And welcome back, folks. Thanks for being with us here today on Conscious Talk, radio that makes a difference. I want to draw your attention to our website, conscioustalk.net. Please hop on our events page. We're going to have some new events posted up there in the next day or two. So peruse that, check it out. Come join us this weekend at the Ananda community for their 20th anniversary and their open house. It's going to be both in Bothell and Linwood, and we will have all of that up on our website. So you can just tune in there and check it out. And then also join us on Facebook and like us. We like you, so like us, and also in our interactive community where we are able to do webinars and give you discounts on coaching sessions and healing sessions and a lot of great things. I'm Brenda Michaels.
And I'm Rob Spears, and we're here with Holly Riley. She wrote a wonderful book called Allowing, and she has a handbook that goes with it. It's a handbook, workbook, however you want, where she drills down a little further into the principles that she talks about in the story of allowing, because it was her life story. It's a portrait of forgiving and letting life love you. Well, it's a portrait of Holly, and if you've been listening so far, Holly, you're just so depressed. That's the problem. That's the problem we have talking to you here this morning. Well, I wanted to sort of shine the light on this one once again, because we were talking about where essentially, where attention goes, energy flows, people have heard so many times, and you're sort of bringing that home to what that really means, because it makes a difference, the energy that you are hanging in. And Brenda brought up something about the power of love, and I'd like you to address that a little bit, because what is it that we can do? I mean, what is this situation that you found yourself in that you had to address? I mean, you were dying, you were shutting down.
Well, you know what? It's so true about love, Brenda. But as I was lying there angry, and, I don't know anybody who is suffering from a physical ailment, whether it's cancer, Crohn's disease, or joint pain, that doesn't have resentment or feel upset or feel like a victim of life and wonder, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why is this coming to me when I'm not a bad person? And as I was lying there in the hospital bed, blaming my abusive family, blaming life, thinking it's unfair that I have such a horrific case of Crohn's disease, I realized as long as I am blaming them, as long as I'm thinking my father's to blame, I have to keep suffering to be right. I almost wanted to continue to suffer and be sick just so I could prove to them that they treated me badly. And it's a funny thing, some of the people I've done sessions with, they find that they almost want to stay sick or suffering so that they can prove to the world that the world has done them wrong. And here's what I want to say about love. And what I realized is there's no way we're ever going to heal until we take responsibility without blame. And responsibility, I love this definition of responsibility. It's the ability to respond in the present moment without blame. And what happened in that hospital room, when I looked at their faces, I realized I was trying to hold them all responsible for where I found myself, including the doctor. How many of us want to blame a doctor because we haven't healed? We want to blame the treatment. We need to take responsibility with love. And as I came back to my body, I was so apologetic. I hugged myself, and I said, I am finally going to be here for you. And I realized the only way I could ever let go of Crohn's disease was by falling in love with myself, by forgiving myself, by seeing the good. Do you know how often we go through a day and notice everything wrong with ourselves?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Don't you?
And you notice when you're with somebody who's like that, what it's like. We just heard a great, another way of approaching this. We just heard another great definition of blame, which was be lame.
That's perfect.
But we do, Holly, we go through our days and our weeks not only blaming ourselves and not only finding what's wrong with ourselves, but pointing the finger, forgetting that 3 of those fingers are pointing back at us, and exactly. Pointing the finger at whether we're pointing it at our politicians or the weather or our money situation or our employer, you just name it. We're in the blame game, and it's really a deep pattern, I think, that sits with every human being here on the planet. We're here with Holly Riley, and we're talking about her book, Allowing, A Portrait of Forgiving and Letting Life Love You, and her handbook, Allowing. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Conscious Talk Radio, your roadmap to health and well-being.
And welcome back to Conscious Talk Radio that makes a difference. Hey, I want to remind you just quickly, it's conscioustalk.net, folks. That's it. That's the website. There are a lot of resources there, and in particular, here in the Northwest, we're drive time, and people can't always be safe and write down those things they heard that they really want to get in touch with. Just go back to conscioustalk.net. You can hear this show and all the shows we do for free. They'll be in the archives. Archives start at midnight of that day, and also the podcast. All of that is free, and it's free because you support our sponsors, those people that we bring to you because we believe in them. We do the products ourselves, and, although it hasn't grown my hair yet, everything else is working great. So, we laugh, but, we are we love our natural products.
You can laugh, Holly.
Yeah. Holly, you can grow too. You can laugh too, Well, we're here with Holly.
He hasn't
Riley.
gotten taller and he hasn't grown more hair, but other than that, he's perfect.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's like, we joke about all of this, but, having a light heart and how you're feeling is really what we're talking about today, because your book, Allowing, brings that all home with your story, and people can hook into what you're doing, Holly. They can go to hollyriley.com, of course, but we'd really like you all to go to Holly's Facebook. It's Allowing Holly Riley on Facebook, and like her and get to know, get involved in the conversation there. And
you have some inspirations there for people, right, Holly?
I do. I have random little notes that will remind people to start being more kind to themselves. It's really important how you treat yourself because it sets up the instruction booklet to the world. So I always inspire people to start paying a little more attention because just as you said, Brenda, before the break, we have a tendency to notice what's wrong. We look in the mirror. What do you notice? Do you put as much attention on the wonderment of you? Do you look into the deepest part of your eyes and say, good morning? Do you get to a place where you can acknowledge you are so determined, like a bull? None of us ever give up. We keep going. But do we put our attention on what's wrong with us, or do we put attention on what's wonderful? Whoever or whatever attention is placed on becomes more real. That's what Harry Palmer says. And what I want to tell you about, as I was in the hospital, this is how I healed. This is how I am completely free of Crohn's disease forever. I have no signs of it. And it started because I began owning what I was feeling inside of me and letting it go. I didn't blame it. I didn't make anybody wrong about it. I admitted where I was. When I was angry, when I was upset, when I was resentful, I began telling the truth, acknowledging the feeling so that I could release it. This is all spelled out in my catch and release. I have a catch and release process that's in the Allowing Handbook that shows people with 3 simple steps how to let go of what they've been carrying around. There's so many people angry at an ex-husband, angry at an ex-wife, angry at the politicians, angry at what's happening to the planet. Anytime we hold on to that, it causes dis-ease. And what I realized and how I healed was I started applying this catch and release process, and I invite anyone who finds themselves putting attention on something that they're suffering from to do these simple steps. They need to feel it. They need to acknowledge that the feeling exists. You want to know something amazing? You could resist something for the rest of your life and feed it and grow it. You can acknowledge it. Sometimes it only takes 10 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes, and it begins to dissolve. Feeling it, acknowledging it, allows it to transform. Resisting it makes it more solid. We've all been taught that the smartest way to be a human is to not feel. It's to, the ones who are more courageous are the ones that don't feel. Johnny, stop crying, be tough. And we've been taught that if you feel, you're weak. If you feel, you're vulnerable. And do you know, it's time to turn it around, because as we feel something that we're holding on to anyway, it can finally be let go of.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It
makes
certainly
a ton
does.
of sense. You know, you just wrote your next book. It's called Holly's Metaphysical Diet. Yeah. And it's about allowing and not resisting. And guess what? You know, but it's for all things. It isn't just about weight, you know.
It's so true. And I actually, you know what's funny? I have a chapter in the handbook about losing weight, and it's actually called the Desire Diet. I'm so glad you just said that, because do you know what we do to lose weight? We resist food.
Yes.
Exactly.
Isn't it hilarious?
I know, and I have to tell you something. I'm very thin, Holly, and I eat a ton of food, and I eat good food. But I do not judge my food. I never take it in and think about the calories I'm eating. I never have the guilt that goes with the eating.
Beautiful.
And I've always been really thin, and Rob teases me that I have this hollow leg that I can eat it.
I thought she was a cheap date because she really didn't drink or anything. I said, oh, wow, this is great. But then she eats you under the table.
But
so.
I learned going through the cancer about the resisting the things, the very thing that you say you don't want in your life. You're holding on to it with everything that you have, and it brings up the point I wanted to talk to you about that resistance, about that we're alchemists, and that we have the ability, the genius to transform. And what we don't understand, Holly, is that when we're holding on to something, we're not allowing it to be transformed, but by feeling it, by owning it, by having it, even for those couple of minutes, we transform it.
Absolutely. Do I have time for one more quick story about a session I did with you? There was a 16-year-old that I worked with that had lost a companion. He had taken his own life. And she did a session with me, and we applied this strategy. And I say this so everyone listening can let go of something that's hurting them today. She came in, and she was resisting feeling the pain with all her might. She was supposed to go to prom with him just this last June. And she was resisting feeling her sadness. She said, I hate it. It wakes me up at night. It wakes me up during any time during the day. It bothers me during school, but I don't get any sleep at night. It wakes me up all night long. And she said, I am trying so hard to get rid of it. I don't want it. I hate it. And I looked at her and I said, honey, are you ready to go ahead and feel it? I'll be with you. Let's feel it so you can finally let it go. And she was scared, understandably so. This is a very painful thing, and many of us are suffering from loss of something. I sat with her, you guys, and she boldly and courageously closed her eyes, took a breath, went in, and let the pain be there. And I said, where is it? I always like them to feel where it is. She said, it's in my entire chest. And she freely dropped into, fully willing to feel it. And within, I'm not kidding you, a minute, she opened her eyes and she said, where did it go? And I said, honey, when you are willing to look it in the eye, it can finally start moving. And this is very important. She said, well, what if it comes back? And I said, it won't be that it's necessarily coming back. The piece you got rid of, you got rid of. If you have another wave of feeling, regardless of what it is, rather than push against it, and I showed her with her hand. I said, here's the feeling, push against me. She pushed, and she pushed, and she pushed. And I said, what are you always touching when you're pushing on it? And she got it. She said, I'm making it bigger. I said, yes, when you resist it, you make it bigger. Now let's allow it to completely exist. And she got it. She let it go. I had her breathe it out of her body, and then this is very important. I said, honey, what do you want to feel? She said, I want to feel peace over him leaving. She said, everybody is saying because he took his life, he's never going to have peace. And I said, now that's an interesting belief, isn't it? So we went ahead and she felt that belief. And she realized it wasn't true for her, and she let it go. She actually released the whole idea, and then I asked her what she wanted to feel with the piece, and she made a feeling. She cultivated a feeling because she decided to. Hear that with all your ears, everybody listening. She decided to feel peace. She took a deep breath. She breathed it into her being, and she was angelic.
Yes.
She opened her eyes. Her life was transformed. She looked at me and she said, "You mean I get to decide?"
Yeah, and she'll always be able to go to that piece,
Absolutely.
And reinvent it. Well, Holly, thanks so much. It was great having you on the show. Folks, it's HollyRiley.com. Allowing Holly Riley is the Facebook page.
Holly, thank you. You're just a beautiful angel. Thanks for blessing us. And, folks, thanks for joining us today here on Conscious Talk. Be sure and come back tomorrow. See you then.